welcome back, everyone. Rather than just start with Leah's report, we have Peter Nevin online now, so I'd like to invite Barry to introduce him and to, put the question to him that was asked earlier. Oh, green light needed. Yep, cool.
So I thought I was at ECAN for a minute. Welcome, Peter. So Peter's background, extensive construction experience, was the North Island manager for Fletcher Construction up until New Zealand, up until the mid-2000s. Is involved in a number of projects for the Crown and others, including the Dunedin Hospital and the Wellington Public Library, I believe, Peter. So Peter came on board at the end of last year as an advisor to the board, and so has lived through the PCSA stage. And at that time, we also agreed with the Crown that he would be the independent risk advisor to the Crown. Peter, the question that we had earlier during the presentation, we made a summary of the D&C contract, and I made the comment that in this market, this is a very good contract. Can you just elaborate on that, please, on your experience of what's going on in the market and why this is a good contract?
Yes.
Over to you.
You want me to comment?
Yep. Over to you, Peter.
Sorry. Thank you. I had a little bit of distortion there, but I'm fine now. So, look, in my involvement with major projects around New Zealand in advisory capacity at the moment, and there's 4 major ones, Te Matapihi in Wellington, the library seismic upgrade, about 8 with Kaingaora, over $100 to $150 million, New Dunedin Hospital, and this one. I'm aware of others. Of all the major commercial projects throughout New Zealand of a large scale, currently, none of the contractors have been prepared to take on escalation risks or design risks. Now, if you look at the majority of claims and disputes that are on those other projects, they generally all relate to delays in design, design omissions and errors, and costs for the COVID delays. This contract here, you are not responsible for any design delays, omissions or errors. And in addition to that, with COVID, you'll only be liable for time and not costs. B6 Watpac have also undertaken, and they've been told right from day one, as was they were required to do, that they had to provide for all cost escalations, and they've accepted that. So in my view, this is a very good contract in this market, and one that really leaves you with a contractor with little opportunity to make claims moving forward. There are about 4 or 5 items, maybe 6, Simpson Grierson will comment on that are subject to some changes, but it's a very minimal amount, that residual amount of areas where the contractor could make claims for. And in my view, that's reasonable to have them in there as reasons for claims, but they are minimal. So in my view, I think it's an extremely good contract.
Excellent. So that was relatively, that was the question. So thank you very much, Peter. Yanni's just got one quick question for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. And some of the submissions that we've received, there's been some comment to the fact that people think, certainly the submitters, thinking that the prices may go down and that we're really locking in a fixed price contract at the height of the maximum cost, and therefore suggesting that we wait. Have you got any reflections on what you're seeing in terms of the short to medium term trends of pricing around materials and construction costs that you could offer us in response? Thank you.
Sure, it's a bit of a crystal ball, but I think in the medium term, It is thought that material prices may go down. Labour certainly won't go down, but material prices certainly may reduce, particularly around steel and chipboard and other things like that. But look, we're in a position, or Christchurch City's in a position where they could also go up. And so having this locked in and having an escalation contained within the contractor's price is very encouraging to me. And I think that in the position that we're in would be silly to put at risk that gamble of whether prices are going to go up or go down, because we just don't know. You know, it's a pretty uncertain situation out there. The other thing I'd have to say is that while the residential market in New Zealand is pretty much falling off the cliff, except for what Kainga-Ora's building, the commercial vertical build and the infrastructure demands in New Zealand are still outstripping what we're able to deliver. So that's going to keep pressure on prices moving forward, in my view. So look, you could always take the risk, but it's not one I'd advise, because it's an unknown risk. And yes, they could go up, they could go down. If anyone could tell me the answer to that, I'd be very happy, but I wouldn't be prepared to gamble on it. Does that answer the question, Yanni?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just going to say thank you, Barry, for coming back to the table. Peter, you can leave us now. That's why I thought I'd do that right at the beginning of this afternoon session. So thank you very much for both your contribution to this work, but also to making yourself available this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. I am available if you have other questions. I'll be working in the office. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.
You.
Bye.
So I'll hand over now to Leah Scales and to present the financial impact.
Thank you. So I'm just going to skip the first two slides because they've been talked about before, and just jump to this one. So this is just summarising that again, the reason for the finance report today. So and just a reminder for people. So in the long-term plan that we adopted last year, so the council approved the inclusion of 483 million on budget to construct a multi-use arena in conjunction with the Crown funding of 230 million. In August 21, the council agreed to increase seating capacity to the arena at a cost of 50 million. That was added at that time onto the long-term financial modelling for payment in FY 24-25. When making that decision last year, there was advised at the time a risk of escalation of costs, but that was not budgeted for. And so what has materialised, those risks have materialised, and also the Te Kaha project delivery team has advised the council that the cost of the project will increase up to 150 million to a total project cost of 683 million, and that the opening date will also move to April 26. Due to the significant change in the financial cost, the council has consulted with the public and to seek their input prior to the decision being made today. The financial models that do follow reflect the impact on council's budgets by increasing the project cost by an additional 150 million to reflect the total project cost of 683. I just want to start and talk about all our key financial considerations we do for all council decisions, not just today. So adopted in our LTP last year with some key strategic financial goals, and these all need to be balanced as for any decision we make. They are building long-term financial resilience, so the financial impacts on the council from the 2010-11 earthquakes and lately the COVID-19 pandemic have reconfirmed the need for the council to be in a financial position to respond to unexpected events. Maintaining a balanced budget and a minimum debt headroom are ways we restore and maintain that resilience. Providing cost-effective infrastructure and facilities. This requires the council to balance the quality and reliability of infrastructure and facilities with what the council can afford. This goal ensures the council maintains and renews its existing assets effectively whilst providing infrastructure and facilities that support the expected growth of the city, but limits the investment to what is needed, what is deliverable, and what is affordable. And overall that, we do need to ensure that rates are affordable and sustainable. And this requires the council to always consider the effects of its decisions will have on rates requirement to fund investment. Just want to take the opportunity today to remind the public on the council's processes. So, a council prepares an LTP, a long-term plan, every 3 years, which includes a 10-year financial forecast, and it includes the proposed rates increases. Every year we also prepare and consult on an annual plan, which details changes to the LTP forecast for the following year. The council's next LTP will be effective from the 1st of July 24, and during the next 18 months, discussions will be held around priorities for new and existing capital projects. Considerations around the impact of delays caused by supply chain and COVID-19, global and economic impacts like inflation, interest rates, and the Ukraine war, and the impact of the Three Waters reform on the council's financial position will inform those discussions. Due to the significant capital program undertaken by the council each year, it is not unusual for the financial forecast to change each year, generally due to timing issues caused by matters outside the council's control. This does not mean the capital program or funding requirements necessarily change, but the timing of when that funding is required does. And this is why an annual plan that might not change significantly on what is included in the capital program or its levels of service may change the financial forecasts, tracking against financial benchmarks, and proposed rates increases. What this is saying is that today the decision is based on information we have, and the forecasts I've given you are based on the information we have today. And the council will continue to consider the decision today on priorities in the annual plan and the LTP is coming forward. Debt is a key funding tool for the council as it enables capital investment and infrastructure to be paid for today's ratepayers and those of the future. This approach provides intergenerational equity, a key principle that underpins the council's revenue and financing policy. While the council uses debt as a beneficial tool to promote equity, there needs to be a balance between what the council would like and what the council can afford. This ensures balance is in place for both the short and the longer term. On to our options. Prudent financial management requires us to consider and manage a number of measurements and ratios. These are considered on the following slides for your options today. The first option we're talking about here today and presenting today is the accepting of the cost increase. As you can see on these columns, the first column states what our rate, this is based on the rates, proposed rates increases for the next number of years. The first column with 4.66 was the rates increase that was adopted as part of the annual plan only 2 weeks ago. The second column is the impact on rates based on the additional $150 million that we are considering today, which added into the rates increase, it gives you the third column. But in addition, the final column is what was our numbers, our proposed rates increases for those same years, which was adopted last year as part of the LTP. And the reason I've included this is exactly what I've been talking about before. There is significant changes even before today's decision. The key areas that we are looking at here are in the 25, 26 and 27 year, and you can see the impact on the rates increases because that is when the council's contribution will start to commence and impact on our rates decisions. Noting we have an LTP before that too. Assuming our current assumptions on interest rates, inflation and rating-based growth, and this is provided from the general rate, the approximate increase to the average residential property for an additional $150 million would be $39 per annum in today's dollars. That's based on a 1.24% rates requirement increase. This increase would occur progressively over the period 25 to 27, and that's as we draw down the requirements. In contrast, the total council contribution for Te Kaha, including this additional $150 million and the operational cost, translates to approximately, on average, $144 per annum per average residential property. Again, progressively over the period, will increase up over that period of 25 to 27, and then as we start repaying that debt, will reduce over the next 30 years. One of our other key financial management tools is our debt headroom. So carrying a relatively high level of debt, as the council has needed to over the last 10 years and going forward, means that we need to focus on retaining our financial resilience and having access to funds at short notice in order to respond to unexpected events, something Christchurch is very well aware of in the last 10 years. A key feature of the financial strategy is to keep a minimum available borrowing headroom to $400 million to provide for this. The purpose of this debt headroom is to have the ability to borrow in the event of an emergency and remain within our debt covenant limits. You can see again in the first line there, which is the comparison from the LTP to the annual plan. When we had struck an LTP, the FY 23-24 year was having a plan to have a 627 headroom. Where we are now after adoption of our annual plan, it's 1.27. And that is purely because of a lot to do with the delays in regards to our capital program that we've been impacted by, which means we haven't had to fund. Again, doesn't mean that funding, as you can see later on in the years, and sorry that's in the way, it does start balancing back up as that funding comes on stream through the LTP. The key period, and if we look at the peak, it is the lowest, so with the 400s limit, so if you look at the middle line, column, the lowest we get to is 436. But when you compare that to the LTP that we adopted last year, it was 451. And of course our annual plan at this stage of what we're working to now was 563 for the same period. And the last key metric that I wanted to talk about today for option 1 is the net debt to revenue. The debt to revenue ratio is an indicator of our debt affordability. So the council maintains several covenants with lenders which set specific limits on borrowing. And most importantly, the total net debt may not exceed 295% of total operating revenue in FY23. But note that ratio drops over the next 3 years into a limit of 280 in 2026. The debt affordability ratio is only one of the ratios that Standard & Poor's consider as part of their annual review of our council credit rating. The council's debt program over the term of the LTP has not changed significantly. However, the timing of that funding requirement has, due to the delays in the capital program. In addition, financial surpluses have allowed the council to not borrow all of the planned COVID-19 borrowing and allowed for the early repayment of that debt that was borrowed. The council had planned to, just for information, the council had planned to borrow approximately 72 million repayable over 5 years, ended up only borrowing 26 million and will have repaid all actual COVID borrowing within 2 years. This has allowed the council to manage the impact of the additional 50 million added into the budget last year for the increase to the seating of Te Kaha, as it was seen below table when comparing the LTP to annual plan. Again, the one thing that we're going to focus on here is that in the peak, we hit the 242%. As a reminder, in that period, it is 280 is the limit. But again, comparing to that LTP, it was 236, so 5% higher. Option 2, stopping the project. If the council discontinues the project, it would avoid the financial impact, including potential rate increase and the impact on the council's debt headroom. The council would also be able to decide if the remaining, some or all of it, Te Kaha budget should be allocated to other projects or be used to reduce our forecast borrowing and rates, meaning we don't borrow it. However, there would be a $40 million sunk cost. This is the investment that's already been incurred and could not be recovered. This is the money spent on the design development, the pre-contract services agreement and enabling works. The council may be liable for some further costs because of agreements that are already in place, and it is likely the council would seek to recover some of those costs because, as I've pointed out, it's the Crown funding we have been used at this stage. And the temporary stadium at Addington is made of scaffolding structure originally intended to have a life of around 5 years. Construction in 2012, the venue is now over 10 years old, and while structurally sound and subject to quarterly structural assessments, it will in due course require decommissioning. As previously highlighted, if Te Kaha is not built, there will be no venue in Canterbury suitable for large sporting events or entertainment events in the medium to long term. The Crown investment would be withdrawn. In addition, the Crown could seek to recover the land that it has given us for the arena site, and currently that has a carrying value of $55.8 million. Going back to our original, so we're comparing like for like, so these are the same two things that three things, rates increase, debt headroom, and net to debt. So compared to the projections in option 1, the rates impact of cancelling the project is a net 3.1% reduction over the next 6 years. The increase in the next 2 years, as you can see, it actually goes up slightly, is the result of assuming we're having to refund the Crown 50% of their already provided contributions. The resulting impact on debt headroom is summarised also in the following table. Again, no surprises here, but it improves our position as we were. Option 3, pause and re-evaluate the arena project. The council could pause and re-evaluate the key fundamentals and the priorities for the project, along with the associated costs and benefits. These were last fully assessed in the investment case in 2019, and the context and expectations may have changed along with the affordability issues. There is a possibility that the re-evaluation could identify an option which reduces the quantum of the cost overrun and still delivers the identified priorities. At this stage, it is not possible to anticipate what this could be. An estimated $30 million would be spent on review and redesign, so if we paused it just to redesign it, and it would definitely push out the completion date for the arena by at least 9 to 12 months. As given the extent of the required changes, we would need to go back to the start of the 3-stage design process. As it is likely that prices will continue to rise, delaying the project for redesign is likely to result in further escalations during the design period, even if the rate of the price escalation reduces. If an option compromised the key deliverables in the funding agreement, the council would need to attempt to renegotiate the funding agreement with the Crown. If the Crown did not agree to this change and withdrew its funding, the council would be unable to proceed with the project. Without understanding the fundamentals of what a rescope, redesign option would look like, we have not provided financial options for this. If a reduced scope could be agreed with the government and retain their funding, it is likely the financial implications would be less than option 1 and would delay the financial impacts on the LTP. And finally, it's really quite key from a financial point of view just to consider the risks and uncertainty on all our council decisions now and into the future. Whilst the above financial models provide the impact of the decision today on the future budget, it is only based on the information known today, and that may change tomorrow. The following are things that are impacting the council now and will continue to influence the decision-making abilities on the whole capital program over the next few years. The global policy response to COVID-19, whilst has successfully supported economic activity and minimised job losses, it has also created inflationary pressure that are greater and less transitory than originally expected. The shift in inflation perceptions from to entrenched has led to fundamental recalibration of global monetary policy, resulting in the sharpest increase in global interest rates since at least 1994. Interest rates will very likely peak below the levels implied by current market prices, but inflation may be slower than expected to return to midpoint targets due to longer-lasting wage pressures. In a New Zealand context, this means inflation getting stuck around the 3% rather than the targeted 2%. The impact of this on the Kaha project has been to significantly increase construction costs compared with the original and even quite recent budgets, in part due to currently elevated input prices, but also because of the increased uncertainty around future input prices as the facility is actually built. But just to be clear, these risks are challenges Council will need to manage across its wider capital program over the next few years, of which Te Kaha is actually only one. And finally, our reform program. The Three Waters reform is currently expected to impact our financial year beginning the 1st of July 2024. That means it is the first year of the new LTP. At this stage, there is no detail about what will be transferred and how much in relation to the Council's debt will be transferred to the new entity. If the forecast Three Waters debt is transferred in full, this will likely improve the key financial ratios. However, getting significantly less could be problematic. In addition, we have the future for local government reform, the RMA, and of course climate change will all likely have significant impacts on the next LTP. And now in your hands for questions.
Thank you. Do I have questions? Sam McDonald.
Yeah.
Jimmy Chen.
Just one, Lee, after telling you I wouldn't have a
Yeah,
question
I
for
know.
you. It just made me think about it. Sorry, I probably should have asked it earlier. So in the option which was around not proceeding at all,
Yes.
there was the 40 million of sunk costs
Yep.
that would be in there, and there was the potential for the Crown to reclaw that. Would you just be able to explain, and I appreciate we wouldn't know, we won't know definitively, but how would we look to fund that? Would that be rate funded or debt funded? Because I imagine it's not a capital cost, so
No longer a capital cost, so it would
Yeah.
be operational. So we'll
So,
have to
40 mil.
apply
yeah.
in this one here. It increases, and that's why we said, and if that option is, we stop today and we have to refund at least half of that, our assumption we've just made here is that we will have to fund some of that. So that was why in the FY24 there you can see, actually, if the project's cancelled, rates do increase by 0.1.
Yeah, so if we're refunding half of it, it's sort of circa, what's that, 4%, isn't it? Yep. If you were going on 5 million for 1%. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Chen.
One question, particularly regarding your presentation regarding the risk uncertainty. You emphasize not only this Kaha project only, it's highly possible some other capital project will be affected. My question is particularly regarding to this financial information. The financial year 2025 to 26, 26 to 27, they probably is a bigger challenge, these 2 years. Also, based on feedback, more than 6,300 people, 25%, they have also not support this project. Particular key concern is for those maybe low income or maybe median, under median income, they probably couldn't afford to pay the rates. So I just want to know regarding to the financial department, whether you have this kind of planning beforehand to help those the ratepayer household, to help them, like late payment, no any the penalty, or they have flexible to pay the rates for the future, prepare for the future.
So all our rates, this is based on the fact of it going in as a general rate, which means it will impact everybody. And so with all rates, rates affordability, as I said right at the start, is the key component. In regards to once rates are going, whether it's for this or anything, we have a number of options for people that if they can't afford to pay their rates. One of the key things is the low earner rebate from the government rebate that we manage. And there's also payment arrangements that we can put in place with them, and the rates per postponement scheme. So there's plenty of options. They are currently available regardless of this, and that's in fact to recognise the fact that some people struggle with it. So there is options, they just need to reach out. Okay?
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other questions? Pauline Cotter?
Thanks, Leah. Just your comments there about the Three Waters and saying that the likelihood if we were not to receive the debt payment for our Three Waters of 1.1 billion, that could be problematic. What is the likelihood of that happening?
I can't answer that, Pauline. So
Well, I thought that was part of the deal that you might know, Leanne. I thought the Crown was taking on the debt.
a lot of it's to do with they are taking on the debt. That's what's been very clear. What needs to work through, and we've been doing all our modelling based on the fact that of what we've said in regards to the forecast projection of what debt will be at that stage in relation to Three Waters. What I'm highlighting there is until we actually have an agreement of the level and how that debt is going to be repaid, transferred, novated into the new entity, all I'm saying, it is a risk that we need to consider that we won't know. We will hopefully know before our annual plan and LTP in the next year, 6 months, but we don't know today.
Because they will be taking our asset.
Yep.
And that could well impair our ability to borrow for the arena?
It depends on the level of debt. All I'm
Yeah.
saying is because some of those ratios that we're talking about, so they impact the net debt, and they also and the ratios go to net revenue. So obviously our revenue is going to drop when the Three Waters thing, our equity assets drop, our revenue drops, and so we need the debt to reduce as well to
Yeah.
have no. So if all of them drop, then it will have a. If we do it based on the 1.1 and the rates where we know, then it will have a benefit to our financial ratios. But what we're saying is at some stage, if that debt number gets less and all the other things reduce, it could have it would have an impact if it reduced.
I think it's appropriate that the risk is raised, and I haven't seen anything that would indicate that there's anything other than an intention to transfer the debt. But I think we're going to be asking in our submission to the select committee on the first of the bills, knowing that there's more to come. We're going to ask them, tell them that we need that reassurance in terms of the level of debt that's transferred.
Yep.
Sarah Templeton.
Thanks for that, Leah. Just with the transparency over the amount that people are rated and any potential offsets that we might get from neighbouring districts or sales or a range of different things. We talked in the annual plan or maybe the long-term plan about the potential for an arena targeted rate, and that would be looked at for the next long-term plan. Is that still on the cards?
Yep, all of those things are on the cards. The thing with targeted rates, because there's a number of ways you can do it.
It would have to
If you
be
do a
capital.
targeted rate like we do for the cathedral, that's a fixed rate, but then it means everyone pays the same amount. If you do a targeted rate that still all business units and everybody gets,
Yeah.
it's no different to the general rate. It's just
Right, it's just-
visibility.
It's visibility.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's not something that we can look at.
And that way that if we do get contributions, we can specifically take them off that so they don't get kind of lost in the general pot.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yanni Johansson?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to check. We were going to have an additional resolution around trying to find increased funding.
Yeah,
So
can we
in,
pop
aren't they?
the,
They've
we've
been
got some
added.
additional recommendations up. And so the first is working to maximise commercial and funding opportunities that will minimise the ongoing OPEX contribution. Requests that council with the team attempt to secure additional capital contributions to reduce the amount required from council, and requests that Te Kaha and Venues Aotearoa provide quarterly updates to the council on progress. So that way we've got a reporting mechanism in place, as well as the requests in place as well.
So just to be really clear, so for example, like some of the submissions have raised a ticket levy. If we wanted to put a ticket levy in place to help fund either operational or capex, would that be a decision that we would make, that we could make as a council, or would we have to ask VO to do that?
Yeah, I think that was kind of asked and answered earlier on, is that Venues Aotearoa will have an entire strategy around the different models of arrangements that they enter into. So it didn't sound to me as if there were a one-size-fits-all. And I think that they have mentioned the quantum of such one would have to be balanced against the concept would have to be balanced against the risks of impacting on attendance. So, but that was the impression that I got, was that they've certainly got it on their radar as part of a mix, but it is not for now. It is part of their reporting back process.
Right, and just given obviously there's still a bit of time before it would be built and before we get the call on the money, the idea of setting up a targeted rate, does it need to wait to the LTP, or could we do it as part of the draft annual plan next year? Given that we're going to commit to the funding, if the funding vote goes through today, we would be in a position to start considering putting that in place.
Yeah, no, we can look into it because we need to consult on it. It's changing. It's changing to our policies, statements, right? So we'd have, but we do consult on the annual plan anyway, so we can look at it. But it's actually as to when you need it as well. So you don't want to early fund it either, because that will add to your rates increase for people. So it's about getting the right balance. So if we don't need to, so we're going to start paying 25, I think it was.
Yeah, I think, just sorry, but I mean, I think for the cathedral, we started collecting it ahead of when it was needed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've kind of used that model in the past, but at least having the options to consider as part of the draft annual
Happy
plan
to bring the information to you.
would be good.
Yep, as part of
Yeah, that was for a comparatively small amount in the concept of the total design, and it was a fixed amount.
Correct.
So this is not a fixed amount. So it's a slightly different
Right.
model, but there's plenty of time for the
Absolutely.
long-term plan.
We'll bring you the information.
And just the only other thing I was going to check is just, like, obviously there's going to be a significant financial impact if this goes through. There's going to need to be some consideration of capital expenditure at some point. What is it, sort of a high level process where you see us as a council looking at that if this goes through?
Yep.
And what would that be?
LTP for a start. So so as you know, we've just gone through the annual plan, so we talk about reprioritisation because we can't just digress too much from our LTP, but we will have another LTP.
So
from the
sorry,
1st of July.
I'll be more specific because I'm hearing some criticism from my right. Is there anything that we would do in the short term if the decision goes through today for the extra funding to look at reprioritising in the short term our costs, recognising that the impact that this will have?
In the short term, but you mean by the current financial year that we are now in? The
So
one that we
projects
just
that
adopted?
we've got planned that may be no longer considered a priority, or things that may be related to the stadium that the timing has changed and therefore we wouldn't want to actually progress right at the moment.
Well, you wouldn't do it for the current financial year that we are now at FY23 because you've just adopted an annual plan and consulted on that. But your next available to do that would be either in the next year's annual plan or the LTP.
Right, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Leah? No? All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation today and all the background work that goes in behind it. It's very much appreciated. So I'll just run through the resolutions that we have in front of us. We received the reports. We approved the increase to the total project budget. We appoint B6 WAPAC to carry out the design and construct contract. We delegate authority to the Chief Executive. We've added in the Chair and Deputy Chair of the Finance and Performance Committee just to ensure that there's some consultation with governance happening along the way. The contract and other project costs, etc., come within the attachment D, which remains confidential for all of the reasons that we've had spelt out to us today. We approve the delegations to the board, and so this project would get handed over to the board with regular updates, which I'll come to. Acknowledge confirmation from the Crown via Treasury that the project assurance points as set out in the funding agreement with the Crown have been satisfied, and then the additional recommendations that I've included there. So I'm going to move the recommendations in as one, but I will put different elements of the recommendations separately if councillors so desire, and James Goff seconds the resolution. So in kicking off this debate today, I want to speak to the opportunity that Te Kaha offers. I've been quite blunt about the BCR, the benefit cost ratio. When the business case was developed, that identified that Te Kaha was costing more than the anticipated return on that investment. That cost over benefit increases with this decision today. We don't have a precise number, and that's largely because the BCR, on updating the BCR, didn't really stack up for me. The reality is that the assessment of the benefits have probably stayed around the same or even marginally increased given the scale changes that we made last year as contrasted with the investment case. But the costs have risen by up to $200 million, which is a significant amount. We need to go into this decision as councillors with our eyes wide open. I've already talked about predetermination and all of those other elements. We have legal obligations when we sit at this table and make decisions. We need to look at the updated information on the bid for a D&C contract. We need to look at the impacts on rates and the debt to revenue ratios, which we've heard about, the ongoing costs of the day-to-day running of the arena, the projected economic benefits to the city and the region, and the opportunity costs as well. And we must turn our mind to all of those. It's not just a simple one-size-fits-all. We also need to turn our minds to the views of our communities, but that can never be definitive. And I want to make the point, because we made it at the time, that the results of the consultation with the fact that nearly 30,000 people put in a submission shows the high level of public interest in the project. However, this was not and cannot legally be a referendum. So I think it's important for everyone to recognise that. We said that from the outset. It is one input into the decision we make today, and that is something we take from the balance of that. And it's all of those other things that I've mentioned. One thing that we can take from the submissions really is that it's a yes or no that people want, and of course overwhelmingly that the ayes have it. But also overwhelmingly, the no and pause submitters put a lot of effort into their submissions, much more than the vast majority of the ayes. Just get on with it was just really the reflection of most of those. There has been a lot of detailed analysis of climate impacts, a lot of detailed analysis around sustainability, all of the issues that we must take into account when we make decisions. We need to look at our strategic priorities, and we need to bring them to the table as we make the decision today. I've commented that this council has not received this many submissions since it asked the public to share an idea for the rebuilding of our central city after the earthquakes. But that was different. This is the result of a decision made by not the council. That was the result of a decision made not by the council, but those that designed a blueprint for our city without engaging with the people of the city. There was no consultation at that time. There has been much that has changed since then. And I want to just pick up this issue of esports. Watching the trajectory of esports enthusiasts and occasional viewers over the past 3 years, we can anticipate a global audience of over 500 million before Te Kaha even opens. What is fascinating is that while traditional sports have struggled with COVID lockdowns and restrictions, esports has continued to boom with digital and in-person tournaments. Now, I do get confused with Gen Y and Gen Z, but they and the generation following have a completely different media consumption profile than older consumers. What we're talking about is 30,000 people in a venue and millions participating worldwide. It also means that we are the only venue builder that would be possibly in the position to build some of the infrastructure requirements into it from the outset and not have to wait for a retrofit afterwards. So I will be supporting these recommendations today, and I will go round the table and invite others to speak, and I'll start with the Deputy Mayor, Andrew Turner.
Thank you. And my approach to today's decision is aligned with some words the Mayor used in her opening remarks at the beginning of today's meeting, that this is a decision that we're making in the best interests of the district as a whole. And this, of course, requires us to consider what these best interests of the district are. My belief is if we get this right, and I hope when we get this right, these best interests will extend well beyond the city, beyond the district, beyond the region, to the whole of the South Island, in exactly the same way that Otatahi Christchurch's role and influence as the capital of the South Island should extend well beyond the city, the district and the region. But of course, in order for this to occur, the city needs to have the right infrastructure to support the city image outcomes that we seek, the commercial and economic outcomes that we seek, and the social and cultural outcomes that we seek. And in my view, Kaha is a key piece of that infrastructure. Now, today's decision isn't easy, and adding this additional amount to our budget certainly shouldn't be easy. Today's decisions are made firmly in the knowledge that they've got financial implications that will need to be dealt with by the next council. And I hope and I expect that this will not result in the sale of revenue-producing strategic assets to fund a depreciating facility. And I hope and expect that it will not see cuts and deferrals made to important key projects in climate change, transport, ecology, and the environment, or community well-being. But what I do know is this will require balanced and sensible decision-making by the next council in line with the financial parameters that have been so clearly laid out today. And nobody's pretending that that's going to be easy either. But today's an opportunity for this council to be decisive, to be bold, to create impact, to create positivity and vibrancy for the city, and to put Otatahi Christchurch fully back on the map and to allow it to fully play its rightful and natural role as the capital of the South Island. And particularly for me, at around what I think is maybe 85 or 86 days before I'll walk out of this building as the Deputy Mayor for the last time, this is a huge opportunity to leave a legacy for the city, which I hope will reach well and way beyond the catalyst effect of Te Kaha.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you. As someone who has been fortunate enough to have played rugby on Lancaster Park when I was much younger and watched many games there, I completely support the rebuilding of a stadium to replace the iconic venue that we lost in the earthquake, a place where many memories have been made. What I'm struggling with is the cost. And while we can't change decisions of the past, you just need to have a look at the recently built stadium in Townsville, Queensland, to see what can be done quicker for a lot less money and what would have been perfect on Lancaster Park. However, the blueprint, subsequent decisions and agreements have cemented the site, this type of stadium, and also lifted community's expectation. Building the stadium, though, will see the city face multiple years of high rate increases with an 8.5% forecast in the 25-26 financial year, a number that rightfully so will not be acceptable, and the lack of clarity on how this will be reduced is very concerning. During this term, we went over the capital program and the operational spending line by line. It was clear that to create a significant reduction to rates, massive cuts to the level of services would be required, including potentially reducing hours of libraries and swimming pools. Even closing some community libraries, including the much-loved Redwood Library, was an option. And I know that this would be totally unacceptable to outcome for the community that I represent. I can understand why many people are frustrated by what has been seen as a lack of progress with the stadium. However, having the temporary stadium allowed the city, which was woefully underinsured, to rebuild without putting an obscene burden on the ratepayers, focus on getting the city back on its feet, and the stadium is the last piece in the puzzle. While I personally believe that the $683 million budget for Te Kaha is sickening, I would like to acknowledge the work that has been done to secure a fixed price contract and the ability for us, if this is to proceed, to move forward with more certainty. While rugby has done a great job in motivating their base to submit, which is always easy when you have a very successful team, the total number of people who submitted was extraordinary. And it was very clear what the view of most people who took the time to submit was. While I agree with a number of their comments, I also agree and share the concerns raised by people who submitted contrary to those who supported the additional funding. So I will support this. But while I work to reduce the future rates burden of this project, it will not involve cutting investment into our communities, climate change action and biodiversity. I will not support selling strategic assets, and I will not support cutting spending on other core services. Let's not let the stadium divide us, but let it unite us. However, this cannot be done at the expense of our communities and our natural environment.
James Scott.
The people have clearly told us what decision they want the council to make today. I hear them and I agree with them. Make no mistake about it, I don't want this project to cost one more cent than it needs to. But it's the time that this has taken which has actually been the fundamental reason why the costs have escalated the way they have. Whether that was for good reason or not doesn't actually make a difference today. All that really matters is what stance you take now as a representative for the people of Christchurch. Te Kaha translates as the strength, and our council has been overwhelmed by people telling us to demonstrate exactly that when you cast your vote. I strongly implore all of you to support investing the additional funding to get on and build this facility that Christchurch wants, needs, deserves, and was promised. If you won't support it to show strength, support it to respect local democracy. According to the analysis of the submissions, the younger demographic saw this, or the building of this facility, as even more important. Support this today to back our youth and back Christchurch and our region's future. Give people reasons to stay here. I consider a mark of integrity is doing what you say you're going to do. Support this to honour the council's word and do what we said we were going to do. Christchurch has immense promise. I'm so excited about our future as a city, and agreeing to get on and build this facility properly will go a long way in helping us fulfil our potential and promise. You've heard what the public has to say in a formal capacity. The only question that remains now is, will you listen?
Jimmy Chen.
Thank you. Based on the submitters' feedback from the consultation and also the listening to today's presentations as well as deputations, so I would like to support to invest up to an additional $150 million so the Te Kaha multi-use arena project can continue as planned. The facility will be the regional asset because we receive all those submitters. 99.1% is from the Canterbury region. So this is not only a city assets, actually it's the regional assets. So the residents of the greater Christchurch area, particularly from the Solwyn district and the Waimakariri district, would benefit. So council should engage with the neighbouring territorial authorities for them to contribute to build the coast as soon as possible if approved by the council meeting today. The invest up to the additional $150 million for this project should not affect or postpone other infrastructure and the community well-being project, which council already approved and put on the long-term plan. For example, like a major cycle route, three waters infrastructure, and a community facility. Even in the future, we might have review those priorities. But I think these three categories should be most important. Another one regarding ongoing cost associated with the arena. Both capital and operational would represent a further increase in rates at a time when households are already under significant pressure. Cost of living in Christchurch could become unsustainable. So I would like to, to ask our council officer, need to prepare beforehand to help all those those low-income people, give them a more flexible, help them to pay the rates and not any late payment, the kind of penalty. Also, this time regarding the consultation, even we get 25,000 submitters feedback, but compared to the whole 392,000 population, it is still only the 6.57%. But how to improve those more percentage? The people can be the feedback to the council. This is how the continue the work. particularly regarding those diversified community. There's still very low percentage to feedback. So but generally speaking, I support. I support this one to make this city can totally comply with our social, cultural, economic, environment, community well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jani Johansson.
Thank you. Today we're making a decision after consulting our community over whether we invest additional funding into the proposed new stadium so it can proceed. Despite the majority of feedback being supportive of extra money, there have been very clear, legitimate concerns raised about cost, location, design and need, many of which I share. In my view, the question facing us today is not about whether we need a stadium, where it is located or how it is designed, as I believe many of those issues have been discussed and decided through previous votes, decisions of council and government, many of which I have not agreed with. I've long held the view that the decision by central government to change the council's publicly consulted on Sharon Idea Central City Plan with an imposed blueprint that featured no opportunity for the public to have their say was wrong. This blueprint put public facilities onto private land and failed to provide clarity on who was paying and who was delivering. It effectively supersized the Central City Plan from a cost of $800 million to a cost of $2 billion without the security of funding to pay for it and get it delivered in the timeframes announced, along with the delay in private land acquisitions. Many perfectly good buildings, such as NG, were demolished and profitable businesses and thriving communities were forced off their land to satisfy central government's desire to impose its will on local people and our city. This is what has led to slow progress and unrealistic expectations. The blueprint was never going to deliver the stadium as it was presented. That is what has led us to today after many years of frustration. Many of the submissions highlight that Lancaster Park was perfectly suitable as a location close to the CBD and as a site that could cater to multiple events. And there needed to be synergy with other anchor projects, and I commend the Multi-Purpose Arena Trust and architect Tom Craig for their unique and elegant plans submitted to us that would have done just that. But sadly, things have progressed past a point of no return with huge sunken costs on the existing site and design already. Many submitters have raised concerns that if the stadium proceeds, it must not be instead of forgetting about things such as our messed up roads and footpaths in the east, alongside dealing with the pervading stench of the organics plant and wastewater treatment plant. I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment of such submissions. If the vote goes through today with the additional funding, then when the inevitable reprioritisation happens, it should be at the expense of gold plating the central city roads, rather than at the cost of stopping local projects in local communities that repairs and renews the munted infrastructure. If we can afford to add a significant amount of money to the stadium, then there can be no more excuses that we cannot afford to fix our social housing, fix the basics, or support the social recovery in our suburbs. The main question in my mind is, should we agree to the additional investment because of the security of a fixed price contract that will get the stadium built now at a certain price, rather than risk doing it later at an unknown cost? In conclusion and on balance, taking on board the professional advice, gaining certainty with a fixed price contract, and respecting the wishes of the overwhelming public feedback, it is better to vote in favour today of the resolutions than oppose, with a strong commitment to work towards securing additional funding revenue sources to minimise the cost impact on our city as best we can and ensure those who benefit the most pay their fair share.
Thank you. Melanie Coker.
I think it's important today that the vote across this council reflects the range of opinions we've heard from Christchurch. During the weeks leading up to today, I've heard from so many people, especially those on fixed incomes, about how they fear the rates increases as a result of the current project. I've heard from people who believe that there are higher priorities in this city: repairing our roads, transport and water infrastructure, moving the organics processing plant, local community projects, and tackling the challenge of climate change by all means possible. They would like to see the scope re-evaluated and for our city to live within its means. This has been the majority view I have personally heard. For me, though I'm very impressed by the quality of the venue presented today, my greatest fear is lumbering a future council and the people of Otatahi Christchurch with an economic burden that may not pay us back. It is well documented that the economics of sports stadiums do not add up, But this lack of economic gain can be made up by the opportunity for events not seen here for more than a decade, an increase in civic pride and investor confidence. I certainly wish these outcomes for our wonderful city, but is it worth the financial risk at the moment? Yes, we've been told it's a fixed price contract. There are those in the construction industry who think this is too good to be true. For me, the very low risk that the cost isn't covered is not enough. That risk could eventuate. It just takes one too many unforeseen costs to have that occur. And we in Christchurch are no strangers to the unforeseen. In fact, we are all too familiar. I believe we should not be taking our debt to the limits, and especially in uncertain times. I don't think we can be so naive to think the uncertainty and possibly grim outlook that's on the horizon globally is going to bypass us. With interest rates climbing, how high will they go, especially in the years when we take on the majority of the debt? What is going to be the effect on Council's financial position once the water reforms have kicked in? Will we have the financial ability to deal with unexpected situations in years to come? With these unknowns in our city's experience, is a decision now financial sense? Also, consider that Council will borrow this debt over 30 years for a build with a shorter estimated life of only 25 years. I believe now's the time for far smarter spending and less borrowing. Although I want to see a new stadium in Christchurch, I cannot support this today. I think the risks are too great. The price has gone too far. I feel the rates burn in on those who will not even be able to afford the ticket price to go there. Most of the people I talked to that were concerned about this project had not made a submission when I talked to them. Many of them think the council doesn't listen to them. I have listened and I have heard you.
Thank you. Catherine Chu.
I'll be really brief. Today we consider possibly one of the biggest, most important decisions that this council will make that will steer the direction of Christchurch, Canterbury and the lives of our future generations in a highly significant way. We have an obligation to honour the promise that we made to our community and the trust that they put in us. In my view, we have absolutely no excuse, especially now that we've secured a fixed price contract. Now is the time to show leadership and commitment. And with that, I'll be voting for the option 1 to invest in addition up to 150 mil to enable the project to continue as planned and promised. The only option that I see that is before us today that is the right one for Christchurch.
Dan McDonald.
Yeah, thank you. I won't speak for too long because I haven't got COVID, but I think I'm losing my voice. Look, I actually really enjoy these debates at council, and in a weird way, it's sort of funny we're getting towards the end of the term because they are so, I think, professionally robust, but yet we're also respectful in everyone's different views, and I think that's the whole point of a democracy. And when you have such a big turnout in terms of the feedback on the stadium, I think we're actually doing it justice, even though we have differing views in what we're doing today. Look, I think no one is happy about the price, so I think we need to be really upfront about that. Of course, if we could have done it for less, we certainly would have, and we can argue about the contract methodology and the like, but I think we're at a point now where we have to look and say, actually, what is the way forward for Christchurch? Do we take that bold ambition and show that real leadership and actually drive it forward, or do we look at those sunk costs and have another argument for 10 years? And I think that's the reality. We'd have to go back to the Crown, renegotiate. We already have sunk $40 million into this. And, from a logical point of view, I'm the first to admit I'm always advocating for financial restraint around here, but I genuinely get stuck in this one because actually I can't see any other way through it. The reality is we need to deliver it for the city. Had we delivered it a couple of years ago, and I don't think we'd get into that today, it may have been cheaper, but we will never know. So look, my view is actually we just need to get on and do this. I think that's been the majority theme that's come through. And I do actually want to also acknowledge Barry and his team and also Mary Richardson and her team because they have worked around the clock to not only handle the submissions, but to drive a really, really good contract. And, I sort of asked a couple of stupid questions today of Barry and the team, but I've done that deliberately because I think the public needed to have confidence that actually the contractual arrangements that have been set up are going to deliver that value for money. And, the theme that has come through is, is this a town hall 2.0? We can tell the public it's not. The scope will be locked in and we will deliver it. So, look, I think we are the city's civic leaders, and I think today we owe that leadership to the city. We need to get on and deliver it, and I hope others support it as well.
Anne Galloway.
Kia ora. I will also be voting in favour of all the recommendations before us today for these reasons. The building and operation of Te Kaha provides the opportunity to come together to celebrate who we are, o te tahi Christchurch. This project offers us a challenge to exercise collective efficacy, which is defined as the capacity for a community to act together on matters of common interest. I believe this project has enormous potential to unite our community at a time when we have been divided, at times bitterly, by issues around an ongoing pandemic, fires, floods, and other challenges. In addition, Te Kaha will generate jobs, improve infrastructure, stimulate economic growth in retail, real estate, manufacturing and tourism, and of course construction. Very early this morning, a group of us returned from a very valuable and successful sister city visit to Adelaide. We were all struck by the deeply felt civic pride that the residents of that beautiful city expressed. This pride largely emanates from living in a city that they love because of the fantastic facilities that provide many and varied opportunities to come together to celebrate and strengthen their identity. And importantly, they enable the city to extend manaakitanga, hospitality to visitors. They are proud of their city. I believe the construction and operation of Te Kaha will inject a much needed dose of civic pride into Cantabrians, pride that has sadly been dented by ongoing struggles since the earthquake sequence and other challenging events. We need to be filled again with pride about and for our fabulous city and communicate this to New Zealand and the world. I'm wearing red and black today because these colours are those that Cantabrians relate to, and it felt like the right thing to do, but also because they reflect the Maori proverb that is so relevant to what we must do to get Te Kaha up and running. Ma whiro, ma pango, ka ote ai te mahi. Translated, this means, when red and black, that means everyone, does their part, the work will be complete. Finally, future councils must ensure that every Cantabrian is resourced to enable them to attend events at Te Kaha and to experience the pride that will come from living in a city with a magnificent arena that will be Te Kaha. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Major.
Excuse me. It gives me great delight to support this today. We will finally be underway with a project that so many have been waiting for. Businesses have invested in the city on the proviso that they would have a stadium. It is clear that 3/4 of the people who submitted support getting on with it. It must not be a burden on ratepayers, and the council must go over future budgets line by line to find as many savings as they can. I feel we're definitely doing the right thing, and the stadium, along with Te Pai, Metro Sports, New Court Theatre, and the whole Performing Arts Precinct for that matter, library, world-class Hagley Oval, Margaret Mayhew Playground, Town Hall, to name a few, I have no doubt that Christchurch will become the events and sporting capital of New Zealand, as well as becoming a world-class destination. Today, we need to look forward. We need to listen to our community. We need to give them certainty and clarity and get on with the job. And that's why I'm supporting this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake McClellan.
It's amazing to see over 25,000 people have their say on this project. No matter your view, it's great to see that level of engagement. It really goes to show that people trust us to get on and do our job. They don't feel the need to micromanage the council day to day, but when they really care and when they really want to have input, they will. One of the factors on my mind is the figures around young people specifically, for it is them who will have to pay the full cost. So they supported the extra investment at almost 90%. I think it's really important to be clear about what the public have said and what they have not said, because while the public have been unmistakably clear they want this project to proceed, what they did not say is yes to cuts in community facilities. They did not say yes to selling assets to pay for it, because what is clear from the debate today and with an election around the corner is you have some councillors who want to protect swimming pools, transport projects and libraries, and some who want to sell or stop them going ahead altogether. On a regional rate, I think it's a real shame a contribution towards the build cost of this project facilitated by ECAN has only been explored very recently. This is in spite of it first being raised publicly on September 18, 2019. I know I raised it when I first got here. Lack of progress on this has been a regional failure. In terms of climate, any new stadium will have an embedded carbon cost. Let's remember that this stadium, though, is being built in town and necessitates rideshare, cycling and public transport to arrive at it. Let's also remember that inner city inducements encourage people to live in a compact and vibrant urban core. While my view, of course, is citywide, as Councillor for Central, I say this project is good for local business and we'll see some positive urban regeneration outcomes as well. This will be good for this part of the city.
Aaron Kewen.
I'll actually stand up for this one today. When I was first elected, we always stood to speak every single time. It's not because my legs are getting stiff from being here all day on the one subject. I represent the people of Harewood, who overwhelmingly supported this. In fact, was the ward that came out with the most support for the stadium. So that is one reason to stand up for the people of Harewood, because 84% of them said they want to see the stadium go ahead. It's been a while in the making, not the 10 years that we speak of, but 2000. 1,942 years ago, the Romans embarked on building a Colosseum, the first decent entertainment complex undertaken anywhere in the world. It worked and operated for several hundred years. We won't be slaughtering as many animals in ours, hopefully none at all. I'm vegetarian, so I'm not really big on even partaking in a steak, but if you do have a steak at our new stadium, it'll be local. And I just want to say that going forward, I think for us, back 2,000 years ago, all roads lead to Rome, and going forward, I hope all roads lead to Christchurch, because ever since the earthquake and we've embarked on the rebuild of the city, I've always truly believed that this is the greatest little city in the world and always will be. And that 2,000 years ago, their population was around 460,000 people lived within an hour of that Colosseum, which is a very strikingly similar number to what will live within 1 hour of our Colosseum when we build it. And they're not so dissimilar in shape. So good on us, and maybe one day we will be the modern day Rome. Welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Templeton.
Snack. While I don't represent the people of the Harewood ward, I am standing today as a city councillor and not a ward councillor. While the people of Heathcote voted me in, I am here representing those great number of people who have had their say and have said, please don't burden us further. Otatahi deserves a great stadium for sports and for concerts, so people can go out and can have fun. We need the last piece in the jigsaw that is the rebuild of our city to feel whole again, but it is simply too risky for us to approve the additional funding for Te Kaha. We are making a decision that binds the next council to additional debt with no plan for paying for it. We know that increasing rates is unpalatable. We can ask others to pay, but any contribution from neighbouring districts will be small compared to the cost of the overruns. Rugby isn't keen, preferring to either be tenants or to charge us for turning up to play. And that leaves us either with service or project cuts or asset sales that have already been proposed. And there's also the opportunity cost. The proposed Te Kaha will be stunning and exceptional. But we don't need lavish. We need more spent on our roads and water, on rapidly reducing our carbon emissions and on shifting our organics processing plant. We need to rebuild South Library, and the overruns alone would pay for our entire PT infrastructure for the next decade and the Central City Shuttle and more. We need to keep investing in our communities and to adapt to the sea and groundwater rising beside and under the city. These are not going to be cheap, but they are essential if we are to become a sustainable 21st century city and not a relic of the past. Even before the overruns, the BCR was an 86-cent return to the city for every ratepayer's dollar spent. People forget that the nearly $30 million rates residents will be paying annually for the stadium is also revenue forgone for local businesses, and there are many, many studies which show this. It's a clear case of privatising the profits and socialising the costs. The argument that the stadium is just like any other non-profit making council facility is hard to justify, given that when ratepayers pay for libraries and water infrastructure, they get everyday access to it without paying an additional fee to a private business. and a full roof is unnecessary in a city with half the annual rainfall of Auckland. The All Blacks and Ed Sheeran are happy to pay at Eden Park, and other events are catered for at other facilities within Christchurch. I've heard personally from many people who didn't bother having their say, as it was clear that council had already made up its mind, influenced by public statements from those around the table. And the erosion of trust in council processes needs to be front of mind as we head into the next term. Thank you.
Pauline Cotter.
Thanks for those words, Sarah. I have a different view. Te Kaha, we have signed the cost share agreement and we've undertaken to deliver this arena. And we have fairly recently secured crowdfunding. So although our investment is higher than expected, we have miraculously secured a fixed price, which does include contingency and is actually a laudable achievement. So to stop or even pause at this stage will lead us down another pathway which will be peppered with a range of options which will take time to develop, require consultation or consultations, and utilise even more of the budget than the 40 million that we've already sunk into this. We will effectively be going back to square one and will have no guarantee of securing a fixed C&D price in the future. Look, I want to acknowledge all those that took the time to submit, and they've given us a bit of a steer today. And some of the concerns from submitters have been covered by staff today very well, including the arena will not rely just on rugby and sport, but will be truly multi-use. Sustainability and design and operation is high on the radar, and assurance that it will not sit empty due to the hundreds of events envisaged per annum and fears of a further cost blowout is addressed through the fixed price contract. And look, I love the goal of securing 11% of the costs from outside of Christchurch, and I'll be supporting all endeavours to secure that. So it's great to see that's now included in the recommendations. So today we can honour our undertaking to deliver this arena. I note too that moving on this today also gives regard to our strategic priority, and that says accelerating the momentum the city needs. So we know there are brave investors, both local and outside of Christchurch, who've banked on this arena becoming a reality. A decision to proceed today will provide them with that certainty, and that's not to be underestimated. And I hope that submitters who are opposed to proceeding will understand the rationale for my vote today, that we need to fill those 3 blocks of currently unsightly vacant land, move on and provide certainty that this multi-use arena will move from being in our imagination and into a firm reality. And for me, this is an additional project, not one intended to compromise our programs already in our LTP, nor requiring any suggested release of our strategic assets. So I'll be supporting today.
Thank you. I wanted to thank... Oh, sorry, Celeste. Sorry. My apologies.
You were hidden behind the corner of
I don't want to do that
you want me to
right
close?
now at all. Celeste Donovan.
Okay. Well, this is probably one of the most difficult votes I've faced in my time on council, and understandably there's strong views on all sides. On the one hand, I can understand the desire to forge ahead with the stadium. Many want to see action. There's been enough talk, let's get it done. Yet on the other, we also know that because something feels good or is politically easy, doesn't make it right. We're told by many of those who so far declined to make a financial contribution to the stadium, we must show leadership. I agree. We are here to weigh up all the factors and make the tough calls. There is a saying that if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Leadership means looking at who benefits and who pays. This means that the feel-good factors of going ahead need to be weighed up with the hard political realities facing our communities. We are told that this project will bring untold riches to the city and the economic benefits are huge, that the stadium will activate our empty streets, but we also know that a liar gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. This extra $150 million will not bring a huge amount of economic benefits to the vast majority of Christchurch residents. No stadium ever does. Private enterprise, unprepared to dip into its own pockets, is the winner. We've heard time and time again from our residents, they're increasingly frustrated by us spending on the nice-to-haves while they're still fighting to get investment in the basics. In my view, council should not be gold-plating the central city at the expense of those that are still waiting to get earthquake repairs done, such as those in the east.
This means we basically have to prioritise. We have to build long-term resilience to prepare for future shocks such as climate change, earthquakes and other economic risks. It is simply not good enough to kick the proverbial can down the road to future generations. We also need to keep rates affordable for the majority, including those already struggling with cost of living expenses. I cannot, therefore, in good conscience, vote in support of a gold-plated stadium that will benefit the few at the cost to the many. I am pro-stadium. What I am against is another cost blowout. I support building the stadium for our many rugby fans, which I count myself among. We need to create the best stadium that we can be proud of, which is not about doing more, but doing the basics well. So I'll be voting against this.
Thank you. Now I want to thank all councillors for the quality of the debate that we've had this afternoon. I wanted to also take the opportunity to thank all of the officers, Mary Richardson and her team, and Leah Scales and her team. It's been much appreciated. We are well informed. I want to call out the consultation team who undertook the analysis again. 30,000 submissions, it's an extraordinary effort, and I just wanted to, just acknowledge the amount of work that's been done and the other parts of the team that have really helped us bring us to today. I want to acknowledge the Te Kaha Project Delivery Board. This is a vote of confidence in you today. It is also a vote of confidence in the relationships that you've built, and we've heard about that today, including embracing the operator, Venues Ototahi, from the outset. Thank you very much. The last point that I wanted to make before I conclude is this. Sorry, I just did make some notes before. It's been pointed out by more than one commentator that I complained about the original cost-sharing agreement being signed by the council just a few months before the election. And I did, and I always will. There is a big difference. That was done completely behind closed doors with the commitments undisclosed. And of course, the terms of the agreement were not disclosed until after the election. This is a decision that is being made in the open. The total amount is utterly transparent. The only element which requires confidentiality are the contingencies, as we've heard. We've conducted our business in an open, transparent and democratically accountable manner. That's what the Local Government Act requires us to do. It is true we're leaving the financial strategy to the next council, but that is actually the way that it should be. They will be in a position to talk to other councils about the options and how the wider region can be engaged in the opportunities that this facility will offer the region. Thank you very much. So I will now proceed, and I think the easiest way is to do a vote on point 2, which is the approval of the increased total budget, and then just deal with the balance after that.
Does anyone want it put separately? No?
You've just
Sorry?
Additional resolutions as well. I think
They're
it's
hardly
7.
controversial, though, are they? You either support it or you don't. It's...
Yeah, but there are some that want to support the last ones, and
But not
rather
the
that you
others.
didn't assist on this occasion. I think that there are councillors who want to support the consequences of the vote for number 2. So, and if there are other ones that that people want to wrap up in that, then I'm happy to consider that. Melanie?
I was just going to say, could you put one separately?
So receiving the reports. I'm going to put the last. There's a last grouping. Maybe if I do number 1 with the. Sorry, can you scroll to the end? Maybe if I do 1 with 8, 9, and 10, because there will be some councillors that want, and I'll put the balance first. All right. Okay. So I will ask the committee secretariat to take a poll of the councillors.
Division.
A division is the word that I was looking for. Sorry.
Is this for number 2 then?
No, it's for number 1 and number 7.
No, this is for number
No more help from me,
2,
then.
3, 4.
You're on your
So
own.
it's- Excuse me. Excuse me, can I just have some order, please? Sorry, I can't see all the resolutions in front of me. So it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right?
So for the resolutions that the Mayor has just put through, Councillor Kewen,
Oh, the people of here would say yes.
Councillor McLennan,
Yes.
Councillor MacDonald,
Yes.
Councillor Davidson,
Aye.
Councillor Galloway,
Yes.
Councillor Chu,
Yes.
Councillor Coker,
Sorry, I actually don't know which part we're voting on. Can you?
This is the one that you oppose.
Okay.
No. Unless you've changed your mind by the eloquence of the argument since. Right, thank you.
Councillor Cotter,
Aye.
Councillor Chen,
Yes.
the Mayor,
Yes.
Councillor Templeton,
That'd be a no.
Councillor Major,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Turner,
Yes.
Councillor Johansson, Councillor Donovan,
No.
and Councillor Goff.
Yes.
For and 3 against.
Thank you very much. I'll put the balance of the resolutions acknowledging that that has been carried. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. So, kia whakaeria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai. Homi e, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you all very much. I declare the meeting closed.